to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And many more, and many more, and many more. Good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles, and today is Thinking Thursday, Theology Thursday. It is the day where we choose to take once out of the week to take a look at something that is philosophical, something that causes us to think, something that causes us to deal with some form of philosophy or theology or thought process. And we are in wrapping up this book actually for the season. As you can see, we are nearing the end, and the book is called Failures of Forgiveness: What We Get Wrong and How to Do Better. It is by Dr. Maisha Cherry. If you notice, we pretty much focus in on nonfiction books on Daring Dialogues, and we like to pull from people who are considered experts or very knowledgeable in their field, preferably have earned a doctorate in their field, and have left us with some research, with some footnotes, some endnotes, some glossaries, those kinds of things. So a lot of our books that we pick for Daring Dialogues will fit into that category. All right. So she has been walking us through what it actually means to forgive. She's been walking us through communal definitions of forgiveness. She's been walking us through how do you attach and apply the philosophies of forgiveness, because there is actually more than one. Even outside of the Christian tradition. She's been talking to us about how do we take what we know about forgiveness and apply that in a professional setting versus how do we apply it when it comes to community. Really enjoy into this philosophy of forgiveness. And we are on the last chapter, which is entitled Radical Repair. We are not going to finish the last chapter today because we're really taking it a little bite at a time, but probably in the next 3 or 4 sessions, we will wrap up this book, and then we will introduce you to another book on Thursdays. So let's get back to the topic of radical repair and forgiveness. How is this different from superficial repair and thrifty repair, which is what we looked at last time? Radical repair is different from superficial and thrifty repair in every regard. Radical repair attempts to get at the root of the problem no matter the cost. It's about fixing what's actually broken rather than opting for cosmetic repairs. I'll say that again. It is about getting to the root of a problem no matter the cost. It's about fixing what's actually broken rather than opting for cosmetic repairs. It doesn't focus merely on the symptoms, but on the cause. All right. And again, we are talking about radical repair, and we're talking about forgiveness, which is, by the way, a philosophical process beyond Christianity. In a case of a cheating spouse, the aim is not just to repair their relationship, which would require restoring trust, recommitting, and so on. Doing so is, of course, important, but the cheating spouse would also attempt to get at the root of the infidelity. More than likely, they would need to repair themselves too, not just the relationship. Perhaps they will have to address and fix the psychological issue and moral flaw that led to their infidelity in the first place, such as vulnerability, having a weaker ego, lower self esteem, or even selfishness. In the case of the neighborhood that was plagued by hate based violence, radical repair would involve repairing the hateful attitudes and emotions of individual members and dismantling the exclusionary activities and institutions within that community. It cannot occur by only just ending violence. Those who engage in radical repair embrace the discomfort in it. It's likely to feel uncomfortable to acknowledge that violating someone's trust was the result of selfishness rather than the simple sexist excuse that boys will be boys or they made me do it. It's uncomfortable to admit that hate based violence taking place in one's community is not simply the result of a few bad eggs, but is instead the result of a community member's complicity and inaction, or a community's inaction. When, for example, you allow neighbors to perpetuate hateful stereotypes in homeowners association meetings or display hateful signs in their yards, there's a larger issue to be addressed. Addressing the past behavior may cause the community embarrassment and require a difficult confrontation, but we're talking about radical repair and getting to the root of things. This is the cost that must be paid if people want radical repair. Engaging in radical repair is acknowledging that if anything is to be truly fixed, we are likely to have a role to play and a price to pay. Formula One, as far as my analogy goes, is a $1 billion industry. Teams with the highest budgets are typically those who finish at the top of the grid each year. With more money, teams are able to pay top drivers, hire competent leadership and engineers, engage in top innovation. And this shows on the track. It costs to win in the sport. It costs to just attempt to win in the sport. And it's not just the teams who bear the cost. The drivers do too. They can lose 5 to 10 pounds in sweat per race because of the extreme temperatures they endure while racing. Radical repair similarly requires sacrifice from all parties involved. Victims must be willing to absorb some pain. Wrongdoers must be willing to be vulnerable or compensate the victims. Communities must be willing to demand justice and vindicate victims. This is what radical repair entails. Often, radical repair requires time. For instance, it takes time to restore trust after infidelity, to feel vulnerable with those who once took your kindness for weakness, to feel safe around those who may have turned a blind eye while you were being mistreated or refused to come to your defense. This is not to say that we can repair anything if we just give it time. The philosopher Margaret Walker powerfully reminds us that some people who undergo awful situations are not simply healed by time, even when they are able to reclaim their lives, and that some hearts broken by betrayal or cruelty never mend. Some breaks are irreparable, and some people, despite their best efforts, may carry their brokenness with them for a lifetime. Nor is this to say that every relationship is worth repairing. In her book called Repair, philosopher Elizabeth Spellman contends that there is nothing sacred about a previous state or relationship to suggest that we should always aim to return there through reparative endeavors. While it may be worth the effort to restore a classic Porsche, we have little reason to make the effort to restore a Ford Pinto, which were unsafe and discontinued owing to the location of their fuel tanks. Some things and some relationships, because of the danger that they have posed, should not be repaired or restored. The Pinto is an example of the dangers of thrifty repair. When the issue with the fuel tank came to light, Ford estimated that it would be cheaper to pay lawsuits than simply fix the problem. They were unwilling to bear the cost of fixing the underlying problem in the Pinto. They decided it was cheaper to fix their bottom line than repair their cars. but someone was paying the cost. Customers were losing their lives, and those who survived accidents were badly burned. Superficial repair is no repair at all. It is not only a shallow and cheap way to respond to problems, repairing moral ruptures and preventing new ones require us to fix the root of our problems, despite the cost and discomfort. Our last section that we're going to read today, No I in Teamwork. And hello and good morning to those of you who are coming in. No I in Teamwork. One of the most frequent questions asked after a driver wins the Formula One World Championship is it the driver or is it the car? Are race car drivers successful because they have the best car, or are they successful because they are the best driver? When Mercedes driver Sir Lewis Hamilton won his seventh world title in the 2020 season, many thought the answer was clear and predicted his impeccable handling and track mastery for the victory. We can ask a similar question in the aftermath of wrongdoing. Who should we credit for the success of radical repair? The victim or the wrongdoer? Often we think there's only one answer, and that answer is usually the victim. However, if there is any possibility for radical repair, it will never come about because of the work of one person. As much as Hamilton has, his wins are not the result of that alone. He also wins because of the engineers, the pit crew, the decisions of leadership, and the support of family and friends. When he won his 90-second race, becoming the most successful driver in F1 history, Hamilton, with tears in his eyes and humility in his voice, said, "Such an honor to work with you, the Mercedes team." After the race, he told a reporter, "I really owe it all to these guys for their teamwork, continually innovating and pushing the barrier ever higher every year." Our interpersonal lives, engagement in, and success at radical repair relies not on one individual, but on all relevant parties. And the relevant parties are not just victims or wrongdoers. They also include our respective communities at home, at work, or online. Yes, wrongdoers are part of our communities, and they too have a reparative role to play in radical repair. They should do their best to make amends by taking responsibility for their actions, sincerely apologizing, and in some cases, taking compensatory measures. However, communities also have a role to play. We've seen how important communities are in the workplace, especially with conflict and in the context of transitional justice, such as what happened with post apartheid South Africa. But more can be said about their role. One of the roles of communities, according to Margaret Walker, is to demand support and support repair. Social services, courts, and nonprofit organizations can support people in their repair. Social services can provide psychological and economic resources post conflict. Courts can demand accountability, providing relief for victims. Nonprofit organizations can provide educational and mediation support, but communities can also provide voice, validation, and vindication. Now, I realize obviously that she wrote this book, let's see, I want to say 2023. Here we are in 2025, and these things are being challenged in terms of finances, in terms of are we going to have the social services that can support? Are we going to have nonprofit organizations properly funded to be able to support? Are we still going to have courts that demand accountability? Because we see right now, some courts are not demanding accountability. So even in this, with this book having only been written 2 years ago, these processes are already going to be challenged when it comes to repair and when it comes to validation and vindication for people who want repair. Let's keep reading. Communities give voice to victims when they listen to their testimonies. As Walker writes, being willing to hear victims is already validating. And sometimes the ability to tell or have wrong acknowledged by others is vindicating. When our community acknowledges our claims and responds to them, they recognize us as community members. In essence, they tell us, "We see you." When they fail to give us voice or listen to our reports of wrongdoing, this not only leaves our present wounds exposed, but creates new wounds as we are deprived by our community of the support we need. Walker suggests that if the community ignores the victim, challenges the victim's credibility, or treats the victim's complaint as of little importance, shelters or sides with the perpetrators of wrong, or worse, overtly or by implication blames the victim will feel abandoned and isolated. Radical repair is less likely to happen when this occurs. And I'm going to put a caveat in here because I think we are seeing this happen in real time over the last couple of weeks. When people ignore people who are greatly troubled in their communities, sometimes what we see is not radical repair, but we see radical damage. So whether that be through somebody walking onto a university campus and doing harm to the people on the university campus because why? They felt like they were not heard, or they began to blame something that happened to them personally, and there was no outlet for that. There was no confrontation of the blame. There was no um, resolve for that person. Rather than move to radical repair, they move to radical harm for everybody in their vicinity. And we're seeing this again in real time. We're seeing people leave their community where they feel damaged, where they feel hurt, where they feel wronged, whether they have a mental issue happening or not. We're seeing people leave their community, drive halfway across the country, right? Or drive literally across the country and enact some radical damage upon people who may not have been directly involved in what happened to them, but because they felt unheard by their community, now we are all dealing with the radical damage. And so I know that this is one of those topics where why are we talking about forgiveness? Why are we talking about radical repair? Because if you don't start repairing people, you get radical damage instead of radical repair. You get people's lives damaged because somebody felt they couldn't be repaired. Somebody felt unheard. Somebody felt isolated. Somebody felt invalidated. And here we are. And here we are. It seems like every day I open up my app, there's another story popping up of um, a mass pew pew, right? And then you go and you start trying to read into the details. Who was this person? Where did they come from? What was going on with them? Okay, exactly. So I feel like this is an important topic that, quite frankly, more leaders should be talking about. How can we assist and support people in their repair? How can we listen to people that feel unheard because they are not being helped? How can we stop the cycle of radical damage? And one person that I would definitely want to give some hats off to that is trying to work on this idea of radical repair is Mayor Brandon Scott out of Baltimore. Baltimore City now has, I think, their lowest crime rates in about 30 years or 50 years, one of those. And it's because he is actively working to radically repair community. He listened to the elders. He listened to the people. He listened to the young people saying, we don't have hope. We look around us and it doesn't look hopeful. We look around us and it doesn't seem like we can do more than just what we're doing on the corner. We look around us and we're trying to figure out where are the jobs? What are the job prospects? So him actually reaching out And having the conversation with the young people, with the community, and him also being a son of Baltimore, meaning he grew up seeing things taken away. He grew up seeing the community center taken away. He grew up seeing the library closed. And now he's using his power, his authoritative power, to begin repair in a city that many people gave up on. I know. Because when we came here, when we first got to this area, people were just trashing Baltimore. Now you don't really hear that kind of talk happening. Yes, you have some racists, obviously, still here in Maryland who say racial things toward Mayor Scott, but you don't hear people talking like they were when we first came here almost a decade ago, where people like, ooh, you don't want to go down there, ooh, you don't want to go down there, ooh, stay away from this, stay away from that. The conversation is changing because repair is happening. He's not just sitting in his office at a desk talking about the people. No, he's out in the community talking to, talking with, and he's also doing what they say here, that supporting of the repair, putting the money back into the community so that repair can happen. And as that is happening, they're seeing the crime rate go down. Why? Because most people realize that poverty and crime are related, right? This is not rocket science. They've known this for a while. The problem is we don't have a lot of leaders who want to say or who want to put the money where it actually needs to go. And he is actually showing that, him and a couple other mayors are showing that when you begin to repair the places that are most damaged, you're going to see the reduction happen in crime. Let me continue here. All right. Listening and validating are often easier said than done. As the philosophers Christy Dotson, Cassie Herbert, and Kate Abrahamson have pointed out, we often do an injustice to others when they report wrongdoing to us. We might engage in what they call testimonial injustice by failing to give victims credibility either because of their gender or race or class. We doubt what they report, not because we detect falsehood, but simply because we are conditioned to provide certain speakers with less credibility than others. When a poor Hispanic woman reports that her male boss sexually harassed her, we may doubt her report not based on any judgment about the evidence, but because of the roles and identities of the two parties. We might also engage in gaslighting by emotionally manipulating victims into thinking that their perception of wrongful events is mistaken or baseless or morally wrong. We might deny that our favorite neighbor calls someone a slur because, well, we know him. Perhaps the reporter of the slur is so sensitive or crazy that they heard something that wasn't actually uttered. These responses are more likely to occur in instances in which community members engage in risky speech that challenges power structures, such as reports of violence, which challenges misogyny and grape culture, and racism, which challenges racial hierarchies and white supremacy. People who report these instances are often met with disbelief or worse, but such responses block or delay radical repair. For how can we take part in repair when we fail to acknowledge that a rupture has occurred and someone has been harmed? Now, I could talk about this from a personal standpoint. We have people in our community that are racist. And the only way you can prove that, the only way it doesn't become your word against their word, is for you to invest more money in your own property, to install security cameras with audio capabilities. That's it. Because when we had an incident where a neighbor was harassing us and we went to our HOA, They said, well, it's just your word against theirs. You say they did it. They said they didn't. I said, okay, bet. Let's install our security. Let's add some audio. And that way, anything else that occurs, we will have the proof. We will have the video and the audio evidence. But guess what that involves? That involves putting the financial burden on us to make sure that we capture evidence. These are some of the unspoken costs of racism, because now I have to spend money to catch you doing something that I know you're already doing, but I have to provide evidence. So you know what happened? Another neighbor who feels entitled to other people's things, which often happens with the envelopians, as we call them. This person came onto our property and was messing with things on our property because they felt like they could. That was it. But because we're already paying the cost of racism, having to have surveillance and audio, we were able to gather our evidence, go file a complaint in the courts, and have that person issued a no trespass order for 6 months that we're going to extend another 6 months. What am I saying? I'm saying exactly what they said here. When things occur in your community and people either don't believe you or they have a very weak response to what is happening, it requires the person that's being harmed, right, to have to go to another level of proof in order to get any kind of support or relief. Because even after we showed them evidence of this person trespassing our property, they said there's nothing that we can do in this case. You still have to go and report it to the law. So when people are going through situations like this and they feel like, okay, I'm trying to have this conversation, I'm trying to be heard, I'm trying to share what's happening, I'm trying to get somebody to mediate this to solve the problem, and I feel like I'm either not being heard or being given the runaround. Everybody's not going to have our response. Everybody's not going to have our response. Some people would have gone and taken that whole situation into their own hands. Some people would have said, if they come on my property again, they're going to be met with force, not a court order. So when we think about it, when we ask, how did we get here? What happened here? I don't understand. How did this escalate? I can tell you how. Some people are not going to have our response. We knew, right? We knew that the best way for us to respond, given that we have a lot more to lose than probably the person that's doing the harassing, we went through the courts. But everybody's not going to take the court route. Yes, it gets tiresome doing all of that, especially if this has been months of behavior, and it has. But we had enough evidence to take that person to court and get a trespass order because we know what they were trying to do. They were trying to provoke us. They wanted us to come to their house and knock on their door and get into an argument with them so then they could say, oh, they aggressed us. But we didn't do that. We didn't do that. But I'm going to be honest with you, everybody is not going to take that approach. They're not. Some people are going to come outside and enforce their Second Amendment rights. We didn't do that. We went to the court. We called the officer to come out. They said, you got to file a peace order, get a peace order filed. Took them to court, showed the evidence, and then they got a no trespass order. And if they violate it, they'll be going to jail. But again, everybody does not have that kind of patience. They don't. So that's what we have to think about. All right. The ruptures that occur when people have been harmed. These responses can also cause new wounds. When we fail to acknowledge a person's victimhood and deny them credibility, we violate their trust and abandon the communal responsibilities we have to each other, creating more anger, despair, or terror. To escape these harms, communities should understand that one of their most important roles in radical repair is to listen to, validate, and vindicate victims, and to do this regardless of whether a victim is willing to forgive the person. Communities also have the important role of reminding each other of the group's standards for how they should treat each other. Now, in our case, right, our community, our HOA should have notified this person that, hey, this is not your property is here, this is the common area, you shouldn't be on someone else's property. So no, they were not law enforcement, right? They couldn't enforce the law, but they could enforce basic standard guidelines for the community. They didn't do that. And so again, when you talk about standards, if I have to pay an HOA fee every month, for those of you who live in HOAs, you know what that can be like. Why am I paying this HOA fee every month and I can't get y'all to do y'all basics? Why am I paying this and I can't get y'all to do y'all job? So now I'm paying to be ignored. I'm paying for harassment from neighbors. We got to fix this. All right. Mine is a very simple example. You know, an HOA is supposed to be the community standard. But in our larger community, think about the role of reminding people of how the community is supposed to behave. And what somebody said the other day struck me because they said, you know, back in the day, let's just say 70s, 80s, 90s, back in the day, people felt more like they belonged to a community. Now, oftentimes, people don't know their neighbors. Oftentimes, people are not living in a community close to home, right? Now, exactly. Now, we are paying for our own protection. We live in a multiracial community, but guess what? It's never the other people who are causing the problem. We haven't had any problems with our Hispanic neighbors. We haven't had any problem with our Asian neighbors. We haven't had any problems with our African neighbors. We haven't had any problems with our Caribbean neighbors. It's only been our white and some Jewish neighbors that have caused the problems. And I'm not just saying cause the problems for me or our family. So again, when a person is violating the community standards, we should rebuke and reprove the violator to remind them and other members of our shared values and principles. When we do this, it communicates that we take wrongdoing seriously. Because the reality is, if people see that you don't take your own standards seriously, why would they follow them? If you're not addressing trespassing onto other people's property, why would they stop? And again, that's just one example of something that a community could do to put an end to stuff or to say, we're reinforcing this value. This is your property. This is their property. This is the common area. This is the area that everyone shares, right? So we want to live in communities that take everybody seriously, that takes the values that y'all put out seriously, that takes the covenant guidelines that you all put out seriously. It communicates that, as my mother often reminded us, in our house, that's not what we do. In our community, That's not what we do. Now let's take that a bit bigger and broader. If we were talking Black community, there are certain things that Black people will see happen in our community, and we won't necessarily address it collectively, or we won't necessarily address it online, because sometimes we feel like it's not that big of a deal, right? Or we might say this is an in-house conversation. We don't necessarily need to be having this online, but there are some values that need to be reinforced. But I'll give you an example of where the Black community has come out and said, oh, absolutely not. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. And if you look at how Black community has treated some of them, put her name on particular. She started saying all this anti-Black stuff. She started talking about how George Floyd deserved to die. And slowly but surely, she's been trying to work her way, weasel her way back in the Black community. And most people are like, no, ma'am, absolutely not. Why? Because you crossed a community line. You crossed a line when you started siding with people who are trying to unalive us, who are literally unaliving us, and you said that that person deserved it. That's a line that you crossed in our community. You're saying that people who are unarmed, who are not violent, deserve to be snuffed out. That was a line that was crossed. Okay. And so, yeah, what goes on in this house as far as community values, that's not what we do. The writer says here, in our community, we do not mistreat women. In our community, we do not take what is not ours to take, giving examples here. In our neighborhood, we provide safety to vulnerable members. We don't take advantage of them. By reminding each other of standards, your community standards, and holding yourselves accountable when you violate them, you communicate that there are consequences for not adhering to them. Reiterating these standards can also serve to acknowledge victims because it communicates that victims are under the community's covering. This aids in radical repair. Finally, today, the possibility for radical repair cannot happen simply because a victim has forgiven or a wrongdoer has apologized. Radical repair requires collaboration. We tend to underemphasize the role communities play in the work of repair. Likely, the largely anonymous pit crews, as we gave the analogy earlier, make the victory possible for their team's famous drivers. Community members make radical repair possible. And when our communities underperform by responding slowly to wrongdoing, by failing to take problems seriously, or by refusing to hold each other accountable, not only can they inhibit radical repair, they can create new problems and harms that require our attention. Another example of this is how people responded to the trial of Mr. Combs. There was some splits in how the community responded to that. Some people were trying to downplay the wrongdoing. Some people were failing to take it seriously. Some people didn't think that he needed to be held accountable. And all of that inhibits radical repair because how you spoke about what he did to women, how you spoke to um, how he was treating people like chattel, because that's really what it was. There was a measure of trafficking that happened. How you responded to that tells women in our community whether or not they are safe with you and around you. If you didn't see a problem with what happened, there's no way you could get me in a room with you by myself or in company with you with other people. You know why? Because I would not trust my ability to remain sober in a space with people who feel like what he was doing was okay. I don't trust you. I don't trust your events, and I certainly don't trust you to hand me something to drink. Those three things go out the window when I see how certain people responded to that whole thing. It says it's giving not safe. And believe it or not, a lot of women are not going to come flat out and say, I don't feel safe with you anymore because of your response to that trial. But a lot of women have taken note. You are now lodged up here as unsafe, male or female, by the way, male or female. Because if you were a woman who didn't have a problem with what happened, I don't trust you either. I don't. And sometimes, I mean, people can feel that that's harsh, but I pay attention to how people respond to the abuse and mistreatment of others. And if you didn't think that there was anything wrong with what he did, you and I will probably not be in a social setting together. Not, and I know that you were okay with what happened. All right. That is what I wanted to share today. I hope that I have said something that would get you thinking. Um, I'm going to try to bring you on, Pastor Ben. So give me a moment. I'm going to try to send the message to you. One moment. Okay. It is saying it's not enabled. Let me try again. Okay, it's not saying it's enabled. I don't know why I can't send you the link. So I'm going to have to end here. And now I'm very sad. But Friday, we will be back. We will be talking about health again, but we are going to open up with failures of forgiveness. In our conversation time, I'm going to try to make sure that we can chat on our next show. Because I know, Pastor Ben, I know you have some things that you want to say about today's conversation. But for some reason, it's not letting me send you the link at all. It's not letting me open it up to send it to you. So we will pick up here tomorrow as the universe wills. Okay. Please write down what you intended to say or touch on so that we can start our conversation on failures of forgiveness. Again, I want to thank those of you who came to join us for this conversation. Remember that it's really important that if you are in community with people, that people feel heard with you, that they feel like they can come to you if something is wrong and that you will at least hear them. You might not be able to give them the resources they need, but maybe you can point them in the right direction. You might not be the law, right, to enforce something criminal that may have happened, but you can offer them that support to say, hey, I'm behind you if you need to take this to the next level. Let's try to be better about that in our communities with our friends. When people are coming to us to say, hey, I have something serious that I need to share. If you're not in a position to maybe listen to that person in the moment, try to say, hey, I hear you. I understand that something terrible, something important has happened. Let's make time for me to hear you. And if I don't have the time, let me point you to a resource so you can at least be heard in the moment. Can we all do that? There are different numbers you can call, like 211 and 311, where people can be heard. They can have someone to talk to about something that's happened, and then get some further references. But I hope we all try to be a little bit better about validating and letting people know that what happened to you is not okay. Let's get you some help. Let's see how we can support you. And if I can't support you directly, let me see what resources are out there so you can get the support that you need. All right. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. Again, I want to thank you for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so continue to go out and be light. Take care, be safe, be well, and be light.